How you doing today? Probably one of the most frustrating things about playing basketball is having days where you just don't hit anything. You're up and down. When I was in school, growing up, high school, middle school, I was a real good shooter. I can hit shots from anywhere, and I think that's where Josh learned it. Y'all laugh way too hard on that. All the beatings I gave him in the backyard. I'm a good shooter, and I play on Thursday nights, and there are times when I go and I play and I shoot really, really well. I make everything. And then there are some nights I don't make anything. I'm missing shots. A couple weeks ago, I was playing, and everybody who knows me at the gym, they know that when I play ball, that I usually hit my shots, hit my threes, hit my shots. And so this particular night, I could not hit anything. I was missing shot after shot after shot. And Maud was there, and she was sitting up in the stands, and I would come off the court mad, hitting the bench, like, this is ridiculous, I can't make anything. And she's like, baby, just pass the ball. It's not your night. Just pass the ball. I said, no, I'm not going to. So I went back out there, keep shooting, can't make anything. There's guys on the bench sitting along with her, and they're saying, he never misses this many shots. What's going on? She heard that. I said, see, baby, I can make those shots. Just because you're here, that's not why I'm missing anything. Nights when I'm on, nights when I'm off, and I talk to Josh and say, Josh, I was playing, I was shooting well, and then the other night I couldn't hit anything. He's like, you know what? Scorers have those kind of nights. You have nights where you just can't make your shots. He said, look at Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant, one night will shoot, and he'll have 40 points, and then the next night he'll have 4 points, and he'll be jacking up a bunch of shots. It's just the way it is. You just got to keep shooting. And I said, okay, that makes sense. So I went out the next week, and I was hitting my shots again. I said, oh, praise you, Lord Jesus, because I get very, very frustrated and very animated when I play ball. But it's annoying to have this up and downness. And for me, in the Christian life, it's kind of annoying to me that some days I feel like I'm so consistent. I feel like I'm just hitting on all cylinders, and then the next time, like the next day, it's totally off. You ever have those days where you're hitting it? You're hitting the spiritual Christian life great. You wake up with your mind stayed on Jesus. You open the Bible and you're reading it and you're loving it. You're praying for an hour. Then you get up and you go downstairs and you begin to pray over your children. You get to pray over your husband. And then you go outside. You witness to an atheist and he gets saved. And then you go to a homeless shelter and you feed the homeless. And then you come back home and you intercede on behalf of the nation. And you go to bed just continuing in that state of worship. Just have those days that are just perfect. And then you have those other days where you wake up and you're just like, I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to read this Bible. I don't want to pray. Nobody ever talked to me about Jesus. Somebody can literally come up to you and say, how do I get saved? And you say, you know what? It's just a bad time. It's just a bad time. But you have those up and down days, those days where you're just like, man, I wish I was more consistent. I wish I did things more consistently. Ever read the Bible and you see these people in the Bible and you say, man, those people they got it together, man. They look at the things that they're doing. They have so much faith, so much commitment, so much power. Look at all that God is doing through them. I wish I could do that. I wish I could be like them. I wish I had that type of faith. I don't have that type of faith. I'm not all that I need to be. I can't live up to what I'm reading. I don't know if you've ever read the Bible and felt like that. If you read the Bible and you feel like that, then let me just tell you something. You're missing a very important principle in Scripture. And this is the principle. God uses messed up tools. God uses messed up tools. Now you might say, well, I see people doing great things in the Bible. I see people having a lot of victory in the Bible. Let me just give you a few things. Some of your heroes. Noah was a drunk. Gideon was insecure. Jonah ran from God. The disciples fell asleep while praying. How do you fall asleep with Jesus right there? I mean, you can literally be like, in the name of him. He's right next to you. How do you fall asleep with the Lamb of God in your midst? That doesn't make any sense. Elijah was suicidal. Peter was a coward. Peter denied Christ. Jacob was a deceiver. Rahab was a prostitute. Samson was a womanizer. Moses had self-esteem problems. David was an adulterer / murderer. The Samaritan woman was divorced 5 times. And the person she was with at the moment was not her husband. This is a great all-star team, isn't it? See God picking his team. Oh, yeah, let me get the drunk and the murderer. Yeah, the guy who beats women. Yeah, come. This is ridiculous. God uses messed up tools. None of these people are perfect. None of these people, you look at them and you say, man, there's nothing special about you. One person said this: we are not to walk in all the footsteps of the saints, but only in the footsteps of their faith. You see, I don't want you to do everything I do. Because if you do everything I do, you're going to be in trouble. But I do want you to follow in the things that I do that are right and are filled with faith. And those people we see in the Bible, we're not supposed to follow everything they do. They were messed up people. They were imperfect. But we follow in the footsteps of their faith. So today, we've been talking this month about stewardship. And I think what might be the most important topic when you're talking about stewardship is the issue of trust. Because many of us, when we look at the Bible, we see these people were filled with just a trust that God was going to do what he said he was going to do. And over, though, you see that they were not. In fact, they did things all the time that showed that they really didn't trust God. I'm going to give you a principle, and I want you to remember this. You can write it down or just remember it in your mind. It's this: trusting God is a decision. Trusting God is a decision. Now, all you guys made decisions when you came in today. You decided where you're going to sit, decided what you're going to wear, you decided where you're going to park. You all made different choices today. And what happened, you had one path or another path or multiple paths in front of you, and you said, I'm going to choose this specific path. And when we're talking about trusting God is a decision, sometimes we think that trusting God is just saying, I trust you, God. Or when the pastor says, you got to trust God, saying amen. That's not trusting God. To trust God is a decision, and what that means is you have to make a choice to go down a particular specific path. So if I ask you, are you trusting God? You should be able to show me certain things that you are doing, certain steps that you are taking to show that you are actually trusting God. Because trusting God is not accidental. It's intentional. You don't accidentally start trusting God. It's intentional. So when you look at the Bible, you say, man, there's so many people in the Bible that I look up to because of their faith, because of their trust in God. But there are some people in the Bible that I think we should look at because it shows us the frailty of being human, and it shows us that, man, this is somebody that I can look up to because I'm thinking this person, based on all the things that they're doing, that would never mess up. But you see it all the time. And the story we're going to look at today is a story that has always amused me. It's always amused me. Every time I read it, I laugh. Every time I read it, I get a little upset. Every time I read it, I think, I'm not like that. And every time I read it, I think, you know what, I'm just like that. Every time I read this story, I look in our church and I see people just like that. This is an interesting story we're going to look at today. And the story deals with trust. Now, I want you to track with me because I don't want you to think this is not me. I don't have trust issues. Now, based on the way you guys are agreeing with me, I think all of us have some type of trust issues. Whether it be with people, but what's tragic is we have a trust issue with God. That's what's tragic. And the way I know we have those trust issues is because of the way we act, not because of what we say. We say all the right things. I almost never hear anybody say, I don't trust God right now. I have no faith. Jesus is dead. I never hear anybody say anything like that. But yet our actions, sometimes that's what preaches louder than what we say. So I want you to look at this story with me. If you got a Bible, turn to Genesis chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12. If you've never heard this story before, you're going to love this story. And if you've heard this story before, you're going to see how great it is. Genesis chapter 12, I'm going to start in verse 10. Genesis chapter 12 and starting at verse 10. Well, you got to say, uh-huh. There we go. Now, well, before I read this, this is the story of Abram. And you know, Abram, God came to Abram while he was living in his own country, and he told him, I want you to go to a land that I'm going to call you to. I'm not telling you where you're going. I'm just going to tell you I want you to go to this land and just go where I show you. So Abram actually got up and he went. And God said he was going to bless him. God said he was going to make him a great nation, that those who blessed him would be blessed and those who cursed him would be cursed. He promised that his offspring, through his offspring, his children, the whole earth, the whole nations would be blessed. And so God has these great promises that he gives to this man Abram. And so this is where we pick it up in verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. So here you have Abram. He's in the place God told him to be, and he gets there, and then a famine happens. Now you got to know, Abram has cattle, he has sheep, he has herds, so if there's a famine, it's going to affect him. It's going to affect his sheep, it's going to affect his herds, it's going to affect his money, all that. So he's a little freaked out, and so he decides, I'm going to go down to Egypt to live for a little while, just until this famine goes away. And look what happens. We're going to come back to this decision later. Can't say that word. Decision later. Verse 11. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but will let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. Now, let me chat with you for a minute. Now, if you're wondering, this dude actually said that? He did. Now, men, come with me for a minute. You're at your anniversary with your fiance, wife, girlfriend. You're at a restaurant. Let's say BJ's, the best restaurant on earth. You're sitting there and you're enjoying dinner with your significant other person, and this guy just walks up to your girl and says, hey. Doesn't even acknowledge you. He just says, hey. And your girl says, hello. And he says, you look good. You want to go out with a real guy? Want to come on, hang out with me? You know, come see my car, see my house. What do you say? Now, fellas, what would you do? Now, depending on how long you've been saved, it's probably going to be different reactions. But this person comes up to you and they say that to your significant other person. Hopefully what comes up in your heart is, oh my goodness. I can't believe, no, really, is this real life? This guy he's actually saying this to my wife. Is this really happening? And I don't know what might happen in your heart. You might want to rise up and start to fight. You might want to, I don't know what you might do. Now let's take a little bit further. He comes up to her and he actually grabs her. And he lifts her up. Now he said, well, before I was a Christian. But you put your hands on her? Totally different. He grabs her and says, I want you to come with me, woman. Now again, guys, what would be your reaction? Now somebody said the women, they fight themselves. They might fight him already. But listen, a man who sits there and allows that to happen is a coward. Now, all I'm getting at is that there should be something in your heart that rises up that says, you know what, that's mine. You shouldn't be talking to mine like that. That's what should happen. But look at this dude. He says, when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but let you live. Say you are my sister. So the dude walks up to you and says, Girl, what you doing? Come with me. And he said, oh, that's cool. That's just my sister. That's exactly what Abram did. What a coward. Now, again, you might say, well, I wouldn't be like Abram. You got to understand, he's going to a land where he thinks they might kill him. And they might. But he's still a coward. Now look what happens. Verse 14. When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that she was a very beautiful woman. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And she was taken into his palace. He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, men servants and maid servants, and camels. So what he thinks was going to happen actually happens, and they take his wife in there. So apparently they say, oh, this is your wife. No, it's just my sister, and takes her in. Now imagine, you're standing there, and they take your wife to go be the husband of another man, and the king just gives you stuff. Like, here's some stuff for your time, for your wife. And Abram, he just sits there and he just takes it. Now, again, this is a man who God has spoken to. This is a man who has left all he knew to go to a land he didn't even know where he was going. This is a man who's supposed to be full of faith, and here he is. He's allowing his wife to just go into the arms of another man. Now, this is where the story gets interesting. Verse 17. But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. What have you done to me? He said, why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? So that I took her to be my wife. Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. It is a terrible thing when a non-believer has to tell you you're not walking right with God. When a non-believer tells you, you know what, you're not acting right. Why in the world did you tell me she was your sister? This is your wife. Now, how did he find out? We don't know. He knows they have all these diseases all of a sudden, and maybe he asked her, like, what's going on? Really, that's my boo, that's my husband, and God's getting you guys. And so he called Abram and said, what is wrong with you? It's terrible. When a non-believer comes to you and says, you're not living like a Christian, that's terrible. Read a story this week of a guy who was interning at a church, and the pastor wanted him to call different businesses to see if they want to put ads in one of their papers that they were putting out in the church. And so he called this one restaurant, and he said, I'm calling on behalf of Pastor Hewitt, and I want to know if you want to put an ad in our little newsletter for your restaurant. And somehow she misheard what he said, and she thought he said that he was Pastor Hewitt. And so he said, oh, sure, Pastor Hewitt. And she kept referring to him as that, and so he just kind of like, well, I'm not going to say anything. And so a little bit later, he called her again to see if she wanted to put another ad in. He decided, let me just go with this whole Pastor Hewitt thing. So he said again, yeah, this is Pastor Hewitt. I want to know if you want to put an ad in our little newsletter here. If you want, she said, oh, yeah, sure, put it in there. A little while later, he called her again. Said, hey, I want to ask you if you want to put an ad. This is Pastor Hewitt. And he said her voice got very cold and very distant. And she said, I don't know who you are, but Pastor Hewitt and his wife are sitting in my restaurant eating. And if this is the way you're going to do business at a church, then I don't want to be a part of this. And hung up. Now, how terrible of a witness is that? You've been calling this person for a week saying, I'm Pastor Hewitt. And a non-believer has to tell you that isn't right. So here's Abram. He's been rebuked by the world. He's been not acting in faith. He hasn't been trusting God. Now, at the end of this, you might say, now, why in the world did Abram act like this? Remember, God had made him a promise that he was going to have children. Him and Sarah were going to have children. So what should he have been thinking? I got to go into Egypt, and they might see Sarah, and they might think she's really beautiful, and they might try and kill me. But here's what I know. God has made a promise to me that me and Sarah are going to have a child, and we're going to bless the nation. So there's no way I'm going to go here and die. Therefore, I shouldn't go in here and try and save my own skin. I shouldn't go in there trying to scheme. And isn't that what we do? When we're faced with something, we begin to scheme and come up with our own way of trying to make it work. And God says, won't you just trust my promise? So here's Abram at the end of this. He's walking away from Egypt, tail between his legs, dejected. He did not listen to the Lord. He did not trust God, and yet he's going. But if you're thinking, yeah, he probably learned his lesson. Like this guy, he got it. That's what happens, right? When you know better, you do better. No. Because, just look with me. Look at chapter 20. Just go to chapter 20. Now understand, this is 8 chapters later. Abraham's older. God's been doing great things through him, speaking to him, promising him children, giving him military victory. He's been appearing to him. You think, oh, Abraham, he is so mature now. He's not going to make the same mistake ever again. Chapter 20, verse 1. Now Abram moved on from there to the region of the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur. For a while he stayed in Gerar. And there Abram said of his wife Sarah, she is my sister. Now, again, I read this and I said, what? Maybe this is a different Abraham. I looked, I studied the commentary, I checked the concordance. It's the same dude. He didn't learn his lesson. Then Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent for Sarah and took her. It's happening all over again. Verse 3, but God came to Abimelech in a dream one night and said to him, you are as good as dead because of the woman you have taken. She is a married woman. Now, isn't that a crazy dream to have? You're asleep and God comes to you. You know what? You're a dead man. That's crazy. And he's probably like, what? Married woman? What? So he wakes up now. Abimelech had not gone near her. So he said, Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? Did he not say to me, she is my sister? And didn't she also say? Now, this is what people say. It was just a man. No, she did it too. He is my brother. I have done this with a clear conscience and clean hands. Verse 6, then God said to him in the dream, yes, I know you did this with a clear conscience, and so I have kept you from sinning against me. That is why I did not let you touch her. Now, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not return her, you may be sure that you and all yours will die. Early the next morning, Abimelech summoned all of his officials. Early, you see that? Early. And when he told them all that had happened, they were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham in and said, what have you done to us? Sound familiar? How have I wronged you that you have brought such great guilt upon me and my kingdom? You have done things to me that should not be done. And Abimelech asked Abraham, what was your reason? Now Pharaoh didn't ask him, like, give me the reason why you did this. He gives it to him. Abraham replied, I said to myself, there is surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she really is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not of my mother, and she became my wife. Now here's what he's trying to do. He's trying to justify the fact that he lied. She is his sister. They have the same dad. Half brother, not half brother. They are brother, half siblings. Is that how you say it? Half siblings. So he said, well, she really is my sister. I wasn't really lying. See, a half truth is still a whole lie. And the whole point of you lying is trying to deceive someone. The officer ever ask you, you know how fast you were going? And what do you say? I don't know. And you know. You ever notice that when you ever run a red light, what do? You immediately look for a police officer. Because you know you're wrong. You know you're wrong. Lying, if you are trying to actually deceive someone, that's what Abraham was doing. Because Abram and Sarai did not do things brothers and sisters should be doing. They were married. And so if and later on, which we don't have time to do it, but later on in chapter 26, Abraham's son does the exact same thing with his wife Rebecca. He goes to a city and they say, "Oh, this is your wife? No, this is my sister." I'm not lying. Genesis 26, read it later. There's a sermon in there somewhere, but we'll do that later. So Abraham is doing this all over again. Again, he is trying to deceive this person into thinking that he was making this choice in good conscience, and he wasn't. Where are we? So verse 13. And when God had me wander from my father's household, I said to her, "This is how you can show your love to me. Everywhere we go, say of me, he is my brother." Then Abimelech brought sheep and cattle and male and female slaves and gave them to Abraham, and he returned Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, "My land is before you. Live wherever you like." So it's the same thing over again. He gets land, he gets riches, he gets things. And this person just please just go. I don't want any more trouble with you. Just please leave. Now, I want to pull out 5 lessons, and then we'll be done. 5 lessons. What can we learn from Abraham's life about trusting God? 5 lessons. So, number 1, there are no benefits from disobedience. There are no benefits from disobedience. Now, if you were paying attention, you might have noticed that each and every time he lied and did all this, he got a lot of stuff. The king gave him all this cattle and all this sheep, and then King Abimelech, he gave him the same kind of things. You might think, oh, well, he went into the world and he lied and he did all that and God still blessed him. I don't know if you realize, if you go back and read it, but in the first time he got all that stuff, they got a servant girl named Hagar. Now, if you guys know what happened with Hagar, she caused a whole lot of trouble, and all the stuff that they got ended up causing trouble between Abraham and Lot. So sometimes we think, oh, I gained from, even though I disobeyed God, I still gained from it. There is no benefits from disobedience. You can never say, man, I was out there sinning, doing everything God told me not to do, and I'm great. There are no benefits. Lesson number 2. Don't trust in means, trust in God. Don't trust in means, trust in God. Now, what do I mean? We often say we trust God, but really what we trust is our job. The reason I know that is because if you were to lose your job, you'd freak out. How am I going to? How am I going to pay for? How can I do? Because you think your job is the thing that is providing for you. Really, God is the one. So if it's God's will that you lose your job, it means that he's going to provide for you in another way without your job. So you just got to trust him. We trust him. I don't trust my preaching. I don't trust my teaching. I don't trust any of that to change your heart. Every time I leave here, I always say, God, did I do enough to change someone's heart? And he always reminds me, you could never do enough. How can I make them see? How can I make them understand? How can I make them see how great and beautiful you are? You can't. Only I can do that. But you have to stop trusting in means, in things. God does use means to accomplish things, but he is the source. So you trust not just in your job, which is what we do. We'll trust our ability to work as what provides. So then if we get injured, now we're concerned. What's going to happen? If you trust in God the entire time, then it doesn't matter what happens to you. You can be bedridden and God can still provide for you. Lesson 3. When you fail to trust God, it can have a negative effect on the people around you. Now, if you notice in this story, Abram, his lack of trusting God ended up costing his wife a lot of pain. Now, again, I couldn't imagine seeing someone take my wife away to be in a harem. just to go, and she's going to be a part of all these, concubines and the wives of a king. And Abraham, he sat there and he just watched. And who knows what could have been happening to his wife. In a pagan nation, they don't love God. They don't fear God. Look what happened to Pharaoh. Look what happened to Abimelech. The idea that your disobedience, your not trusting God will not affect other people is wrong. Your disobedience, your lack of trusting God can hurt this church. Can hurt your family, your kids, your spouse. So just know, when you don't trust God, it has a negative effect. Number 4, trusting God to provide for you no matter the circumstances. Trust God to provide for you no matter the circumstances. Now look at here's the circumstance. Number 1, remember we said earlier in the book, he was in the land that God had showed them, and because of the famine, he went down to Egypt. I want you to notice, God never told him, I want you to go to Egypt. He decided he was going to go there himself, and he knew what kind of stuff was going on there. Instead of staying in Egypt and staying in the land where he was, and saying, God, I'm going to trust you here until you tell me to move. Some of us, you need to stay where God has you until he actually tells you to move. But when famine comes, when different things come, we get scared, we get fearful, and we're like, I got to get out of here, I got to do something. And then you end up making it worse. I've talked to many people where they say, I want to make this decision, I'm going to do this. And I say, you know what, that's not the best decision because it's going to hurt you, it's going to hurt your kids, it's going to hurt, and they still go ahead and do it. And then in the end, I was right. Because it's a principle. Now he has the famine issue, also the barrenness issue. Imagine God comes to you and he says, you're going to have a baby and you're 90. Now that's what Sarah did. She laughed. She said, that's funny. And then God said, why did you laugh? She said, I didn't laugh. It's like, I'm God. I heard you laugh. How you going to lie to me and tell me I didn't hear you laugh? Abraham chuckled a little bit too, like, man, I'm 100, she's 90. It's not going to work. And this is what God said, is anything too hard? Listen, if God can say, let there be light, and light just comes out from nothing. If God says, let there be land and seas, and let the oceans teem with a lot of animals and fish, and let the air be filled with birds, go. And all that stuff just happens. If God can do that, how hard do you think it is for him to impregnate a 90-year-old woman? It's not hard at all. And guess what? She got pregnant, and she had a son. Nothing is too hard for God. So he should have just trusted God in that circumstance. Your circumstance, you might say, man, my bill is too high for God to pay. My health issues are too steep for God to deal with. I'm not saying what you say. I'm saying what you think and how we act. We got to trust God to provide for you no matter the circumstances. And number 5, grab hold of rock-solid promises. Grab hold of rock-solid promises. Remember, God had given Abram a promise. This promise was that you are going to have a son or a child, and this person is going to be your heir. He's going to bless the nations. So you need to trust that I am going to do that. So when he went into Egypt, he should have said, you know what, I'm invincible. Because until I have a baby, now as soon as he has the baby, now maybe he has to worry. But not until he has the baby. He goes out into Egypt, he should have said, you know what, I'm invincible because God has made a promise to me. You need to have rock solid promises that you go to. Promises when you're starting to falter in your faith, when you're starting to doubt, you need promises to go to hold on to. We need promises, and we need to make sure that you're grabbing onto a promise that's actually a promise. Because sometimes people say, oh, I'm claiming this. I'm like, you can't claim that because it's not a promise. For example, proverbs are not promises. They are wise statements that are true the majority of the time. So don't, because people say, well, I trained my child in the way they should go, and they didn't, and they departed from it. Well, yeah, because sometimes they depart from it. But most of the time, you teach your child right, they'll eventually come around. But there are certain verses in the Bible that you can claim as promises, and you need to find those. I'll give you 2 of mine. You can borrow them, but I want you to find your own. So I'll give you my 2 that I use all the time. Like I said, you can borrow. Isaiah chapter 41 and verse 10. Isaiah 41 verse 10. I'll read it. It says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Got to go to that constantly. And then you can also borrow this one. Romans chapter 8 verse 32. "He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things?" When you're doubting, man, is God really for me? Does God really want to bless me? He gave you the most precious thing in the universe, his son. So you should not feel like God is stingy. He's giving you the best he could ever give you. The best, literally, the best thing anybody could ever give you. So what's all the other things that you need in comparison to his son? So let me end with some good news. This is a good news. There's good news for those of us, if you're like me, if you're perfect, then this doesn't apply to you. I know there are only a few of you in here, but God, here's the good news. For those of us who falter, God still uses us. I don't know if you noticed. Look back again at Genesis 20, and at the end there, verse 16 of chapter 20. I'm sorry, verse 17. After all he did, he didn't lie again, made up this story. And then look what he says, verse 17. "Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his slave girls, so they could have children again. For the Lord had closed up every womb in Abimelech's household because of Abram's wife Sarah." I don't know if you noticed earlier, God told Abimelech, "I want you to call Abraham because he's a prophet." How weird is that? He just finished lying to you about his husband, but he's my prophet. And then after that, he's going to pray for you and you're going to be healed. Can you imagine that? Somebody stand up saying, "God, I've sinned so greatly. I stole last night from CVS. I just stole everything. And I'm just coming here to confess to you that I stole everything." And we go, "Oh, wow, you need to sit down for a while and just learn to not do that anymore. We're going to pray that God works on your life." And they say, "Okay." And then they stand up and they say, "Hey, you who can't see, I'm going to touch your eyes." And they see. They might be sitting there and say, "Lord, that's not fair. I've been living holy. This person out there is stealing and healing people." But here's Abraham. God still uses him. You never need to feel like your sin is going to keep God from using you. Your lack of trust is not going to keep God from using you. That's so encouraging to me, because I have a lot of issues. I have a lot of faults, and I have a lot of trust issues with God sometimes. Sometimes it feels like I'm in the boat, and I feel like Jesus is in the boat with me, but I still I still feel like God is going to be like, this time we're not going to do anything. I just struggle with that. And in those moments when I feel like that, I feel like, oh, God can't use me. And then time and time again, he shows you, yes, I can use you. So let's pray.